office. You care about the community. And so he did, and he won. And he got sworn in just 2 months after Susette moved into the Pink House, and 3 months before Pfizer announced it was coming to New London. He gets sworn in. And one of his first acts as the new mayor is to get a phone call from the real power in town, Claire. She invites the mayor to come up to the campus and visit her in the mansion and discuss their future vision of New London. And when he gets there, he goes in the kitchen, and she says, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" He said, "Yes, I would." And he said to me, he said, "You know, I realized she didn't live in the president's mansion because she couldn't find a cup. But ultimately, we were able to make some coffee, and we sat and while she was fussing around trying to figure that out, he said, I was sitting there, and I saw this easel she had in the room, and it had a big poster on it. And he said, I'm looking at this picture, and he says, man, that thing looks familiar to me, but I can't place what I'm looking at. It actually kind of looks like New London. But that's not New London, because we don't have any high-rises like that in New London. We don't have hotels like that in New London." And then he realized that the geographical contours of it was Fort Trumbull, Suzette's neighborhood. And he's, you know, it's kind of one of these things like, am I looking at that thing right? And then she sits down and they start talking about it. Well, that's our vision for New London. And he's focused on the monogram at the bottom. Who drew this? And the architectural firm is employed by Pfizer. And he started thinking, what's going on here? You know, that's his start. So when Susette calls him a few months later and she says, I saw this thing in the paper, Pfizer. Should I be concerned about that? And the mayor says, yes, you should, Ms. Kelo. And shortly after that, he's in Ms. Kelo's house. He's sitting at the same table I sat at the first time I went there. And he brings a woman with her, overweight, chain smoking, not very attractive, raspy voice, talks like she's been in a lot of fights. And she's a community organizer. She comes in with the mayor and they sit down together. And they're going to help Ms. Kelo figure out how she's going to save her house. She says, what do I have to do? And the mayor says, well, I'll tell you what you have to do. Number one, you need to form a local community organization. And then you need to go to every one of those people in your neighborhood, clipboard in hand, and you've got to get every one of them to sign a petition stating why they don't want to leave their homes. And after you do that, you need to bring those petitions to us. The mayor and the city council, you need to present them in a public forum where we can review them and the public can hear you. He says, then you need to go to your state legislator and you need to get them involved in this, and you need to start writing letters to the editor. And that's about the time Susette stopped and said, hold on a second here. You know, I came here to be alone and to start my life over. And I don't want to, I don't know how to do any of this stuff, and I don't know how to do that. And he says, do you want to keep your house? And she said, well, yeah, I want to keep my house. Then you go door to door, and she will help you. And that's where Kathleen comes in, the community activist who pairs up with Susette, and they start doing all those things. And they do all those things for over 2 years. And they prevent what is ultimately going to be the inevitable. And there comes a point where they realize you can't stop City Hall. And that day comes when the mayor and some other activists who were on the side of the homeowners were leaving a prayer circle just outside Fort Trumbull one morning, and as the mayor and his wife were driving through Suzette's neighborhood, they saw a bulldozer parked on East Street, motor running, big guy named Chico Barbieri in the seat, cut off sleeves, arms as big as my legs, tough guy, Italian, sitting on the machine, ready to take a bite out of a house. And that's because the New London Development Corporation had scared enough people, mostly elderly, senior citizens who had no money and certainly no gumption to fight at age 85 what everyone was telling them can't be beaten. So they had sold and moved out. And now the city and the Development Corporation had title to those homes, and they were exercising their right as property owners to knock those houses down. And it wasn't because they could start development. They couldn't start development because there was all these other houses they didn't own. This was about sending a message. Today is Message Day. we are going to rip some houses down in the middle of a working day with families and people going to work and going to school, running around. We're going to let everybody know this is the future. You might as well give up. And when the mayor's wife saw that bulldozer on that house, she said to her husband, she calls him Beach, instead of Beachy, she said, Beach, stop the car. I've had enough. You go home and you get my crochet and my needle and bring it back to me so that I can keep my hands under control. But I'm going to go sit on that door in front of that machine and I am not going to move. And she does. And the mayor runs home. He lives 5 minutes away. And he is furious because one of the things he'd done in City Hall was he told the guys who handle the permits, if you get a demolition permit from the New London Development Corporation, I want to know about it. So when by the time he gets back there 10 minutes later, he's ready to take somebody apart. And when he gets out of the car, he sees a guy with a hard hat on, and then next to him is one of the permit guys from the City Hall. And he goes by him, and he puts his finger right in his face, and he says, damn you, as he walks by and passes the machine and sits next to his wife and plants himself. And then Kathleen Mitchell, that community organizer, she's on the street with a lot of the homeowners, and she crosses the line and sits down. And now Chico in the machine pulls out his phone, shuts the machine off, and he calls the police. And he says, I got a guy sitting on the front steps, a couple of women. Police get in their cars, they don't know who it is, they drive down there, they're ready to do what policemen do, and they get out of the car, and it's the mayor who employs them. And they're going, you got to be kidding me. So they go up to the front, and they said, Lloyd, hey, Lloyd, come on. These guys, you got to come off the steps. He said, nope, we're not coming off the steps. Lloyd, these guys have a permit. It's legal. He said, I don't care. You know what? This is not about whether it's legal or not. It's about whether it's right. And this isn't right. And we're not moving. Lloyd, if you don't come off the steps, then we have to arrest you in front of all these people. Well, and I guess you better arrest us. And they get the cuffs out, and they arrest the mayor. And they pick him up like a little animal, and they cart him to the police car. And then they cuff his wife, and they cart her to the police car. And then they get to Kathleen, and she says, I'll walk. And she gets up and gets in the car. Now, you're Susette, and you're all these neighbors. You're a 75-year-old woman on oxygen who's never lived anywhere else, and you live 2 doors down, and you're watching this. And a house that took probably a year to build and is over 100 years old is demolished in less than 10 minutes, reduced to a pile of sticks, bricks, mortar, and dust. And then you move to the next one, and you rip it down. And you come right down the street, and you tear down every single house that the New London Development Corporation owns until you get to the one that's right next to Susette's. And she then gets hysterical. She grabs her broom, which is useless, and she runs out and starts trying to fend off the machine. This time, he's not stopping. We've already done that drill. The police have already been down here. I'm taking that house down. He bites into that house. Glass starts flying. It flies in her face. It flies in her hair. Guys are on the side of the road yelling, screaming, come on, Susette, you got to get down. She can't hear because the machine's too high. And the fire marshal's sitting there going, cut the machine, cut the machine. And finally, he stops the machine. And a guy named Billy Von Winkle, who's Susette's neighbor, who's will become one of the key plaintiffs in the case, he grabs her off the porch and he says, Susette, come on, you got to get off. And he throws her in the car, and he takes a woman who doesn't drink, in fact, hasn't drank since the day her 17-year-old son was hit by a drunk driver, which is why she became a medic, because they saved his life. So she's got a big problem with drinking, but not that night. Billy takes her down to the bar and gets her drunk, and she comes home that night and goes to bed, and when she wakes up in the morning and looks out the side of the pink house, there's nothing to look at. Nothing. It's gone. And then there's a knock at the door, and it's Chico Barbieri, the guy who knocked it down. Big guy, strapping guy standing there with what else but a basket of scented soaps.